Hello and welcome to Lost in Sci-Fi and Fantasy. I'm your host, Leo, and today we're talking about something that we weren't supposed to this week. We're talking about Clash of the Titans. Now, what do you mean you weren't supposed to talk about it? I don't know if I said in any of the previous episodes, like 65 or anything, but the intent was that this episode was going to be book 2 of Avatar: The Last Airbender. Earth. But similarly to some sad news, or some annoying news, I guess you could say, about the challenge, so too comes the news that I did not get a chance to actually properly watch Avatar: The Last Airbender Season 2. So that will have to be delayed until next week, in which I will then have this entire week to watch it. I already have some plans about how I can talk about it and whatnot, so it's coming together a bit, but I do actually have to watch it. But with that aside, I decided to do a quick kind of emergency episode. Something quick, something that I know a decent-ish amount about, and that is the original 1981 Clash of the Titans. So, my history with this film is I was shown it fairly young, and for the longest time, my main memory of the original Clash of the Titans film was mostly just the Medusa bit, and then the Kraken bit, and that's it. All of which happened in like the last hour or so of the film. It's fine. But, yes, so not too long ago, like maybe 3-4 years ago, I guess you could say, I decided to watch it again, just to actually properly watch it. Because, I had seen the original, then I saw the 2010 reboot or remake, and I didn't really like it. Then I saw Wrath of the Titans, and don't even really remember it. So here we are. I will probably do a couple of mentions about the 2010 Clash of the Titans throughout this discussion, but for the most part, I will save most of my thoughts until I have a chance to actually properly rewatch the 2010 Clash of the Titans. Because as it currently stands, I haven't watched the 2010 Clash of the Titans in probably over 10 years. I watched it around the time it came out, but otherwise I haven't seen it really since. Yeah, so with that, we can kind of move on and start talking about the original Clash of the Titans. So it is based off of the story of Perseus. In order to save the Princess Andromeda from the Kraken, he must slay Medusa and use her head to turn the Kraken to stone. That is the very basic plot of Perseus. He probably went on many more adventures besides that. I don't know. I haven't actually read the original myth itself personally. I should really do that. I think it's in one of my books. I'm not sure that I have. But, there are some things that I do at least know from other things and whatnot that shows that a lot of the mythology within this is just kind of shaken up and tweaked a bit. For example, the major villain of this film, technically, is the son of Thetis. I can't remember his name, but he's, for the heinous act of slaying all of Zeus's magical horses with wings, magical flying horses, say for one, he is to be turned into a beast, which looks kind of like a satyr, but different-ish. Like, he has kind of normal feet, but a thick-ass tail. I don't know exactly what that is. But yeah, so that's one of the things that's kind of tweaked, is one, Thetis being so prominent, when technically in Greek mythology she's like mostly depicted as like a water spirit, or sometimes a goddess, but never, not really chumming it up with the main 12 of the Olympians, But she is kind of shown as one of the main 12. And before we get into the stuff with Thetis, let us kind of go back and talk about how the movie opens. The movie opens with a bunch of Greek soldiers carrying a coffin and a woman holding a baby crying. And you kind of initially think, oh, maybe it's a funeral or something. But no, the leader, the king that's with the retinue, is sentencing the woman, his daughter, to death. Now, he believes that because she's given birth to a child, and it is probably presumed that she either had the child out of wedlock, or it's supposed to be some kind of, Jesus situation where it's just like out of nowhere. But it is deemed by him as him having potentially offended the gods in some way. So he is trying to clear his name by sacrificing her in the name of Zeus. Not knowing that the father of the child is Zeus. So he sacrifices his daughter in the name of Zeus, sends her off in the coffin, floating away. And then we kind of go in through a title sequence where we get all the actors and whatnot. And then we kind of land in Olympus, where Poseidon, I guess, was watching over proceedings. He informs Zeus of what has happened, and Zeus, mad, says, okay, well, he has now done the thing, so we are going to punish him. We are going to send the Kraken to destroy the town. He tells Poseidon to do that, but also to ensure that the mother and the son make it safely to peaceful lands. And he does. So Poseidon goes, opens the gate for the Kraken leaves. For some reason, they call the Kraken the last of the Titans. It isn't. It's not it's just a big old monster. It's not a Titan. But I guess for the title of this movie to work in some way, they need it to be called a Titan, I guess. But anyway, he lets the Titan out, and the Titan destroys the town. It's actually a pretty cool sequence, besides some slightly janky green screen, or I guess during this era it would mostly be blue screen effects, which doesn't work terribly well at times. Anyway, so that happens, and then Poseidon comes back, says the town's destroyed, and the kid and his mom are safe. And Zeus is like, good. Let's just kind of montage now. So there's a little bit of a montage where the boy is growing up, and it'll then like pass over to the gods kind of talking, but you don't hear anything because it's a montage. We watch the boy ride a horse. We watch him throw a fishing net. Zeus talks to Thetis. Then Zeus talks to someone else. And then the boy is grown, and Zeus has this like really cool like thing where he has just like this wall of figurines that represent the people in the area. Like, I guess, prominent figures of the area, I guess. And like when he sent the Kraken to destroy the town, he took the figure of the king and just like crushed it, and the guy like died. And this comes up later in a couple of places as like a thing, and it's interesting. But during this time, he's like, yay, my son's grown up. Look at how nice and lovely he is. Let me put him on my shelf. Then Thetis comes in and is like, yes, lovely. But what of my son? And he's like, well, your son is a absolute douchebag. He slaughtered... He was given, like, stewardship over this land, and then he just slaughtered every fucking animal in it, and he slaughtered my sacred herd of horses, save for one. And the entire time, she's kind of blandly begging him to show mercy, but like not actually begging, because the acting's a little bit stiff in this film. But I don't blame the actors, because it's a really good cast. But anywho, she keeps asking, like, please, forgive him. He's young or whatever. He's supposed to marry the Princess Andromeda. And Zeus is like, I don't care. He killed my horses. So he takes the figure and he sets it in this like arena. And then he says he's going to become a grisly, gruesome beast. And no one will want to marry him. And you see like this animated sequence where it does transform into what pretty much is like a satyr, but with like I said, a thick ass tail and not like goat feet. But he has horns and like a face that you could probably like smash into a wall and it would be fine. But yeah, so with that, Zeus just kind of is like, okay, matter done. So Thetis decides, okay, fine. If my son cannot marry the Princess Andromeda, then no one can. I will then put like a little bit of a curse to where as long as my son is miserable, so shall Andromeda be. Then she goes over to Perseus, it's his little figure, and goes, okay, and it's time for you to see the world. And so she like takes him and sets him in the arena that like Zeus has as like a display thing. Like when they're like actually like trying to affect a specific like person, they'll set the figure in the little arena thing. But in this case, she actually like properly sets the real guy into the arena for some reason. He wakes up in the middle of the night to be greeted by a poet. I didn't catch his name, but greeted by a poet who's kind of the mentor figure, kind of bringing him up to speed on what's happening, because he's been stuck on an island for the past, 20 odd years. So the poet kind of tells him like, hey, this is probably what happened. This is what's happening here. It kind of sucks here. Sorry that you were put here. But, here's the skinny on what's going on. And then the poet kind of tries to set him up to, look a bit more princely by pretty much just outfitting him in a costume. The thing is, I do love about the poet is that he lives in an abandoned, like, theater thing, like the arena I said. He lives there with just a shit ton of cats. So, like, when he's trying to get the cloak for Perseus, he's just picking up kittens and just, like, tossing them aside. Because they're just all in this basket. He's like, move, shift, come on, go. It's adorable. But yeah, so then we cut to Zeus being like, okay, so you decided to just put my son in the middle of nowhere with nothing. And she's like, what, you accuse me? And he's like, who else? Of course I'm accusing you. Fine. Okay, you give him gifts. I believe it's Athena, Aphrodite, and Hera is who he deems them says to give gifts. I believe he tells Aphrodite to give him a sword, Hera to give him a shield, and Athena to give him a helmet. Then all of the women goddesses just kind of hang back, and they're just like, oh, geez, all for this woman. And one of them's like, probably not the woman anymore, because he probably forgot about her, but it's his pride and the sun and whatever. And then they just kind of have a good old laugh about Zeus being a horn dog. But the ones that were ordered to give Perseus gifts do comply and provide him with the gifts. Perseus just kind of comes across them and knows that there's something. He's like, okay, sure. He grabs the sword. He's like, ooh, a sword. Then the poet comes out. It's like, oh, you got up with the sun. Weird. what's up with the sword? And he takes it, and, like, he swings it, and it cuts through marble. He's like, ah, it's a gift from the gods. And then Perseus is like, oh, yeah, then there's also the shield and the helmet over there. And, like, okay, well, you should probably figure out what those do. He's like, okay, I'll do with the helmet. But then the shield goes, no, me! Do the shield first! And he's like, okay. So he goes over to the shield, turns it around, and it's Zeus in a very, I want to say, Jor-El from Superman way. He's like, you must find your destiny. Take these gifts from the gods and go find and fulfill your destiny. Bye. Not talking straight at all. It's a bit silly. But then Perseus goes over to the helmet and is like, okay, let's see. He puts the helmet on and he's like, am I invisible? And the poet's like, yeah, I can't see shit. He's like, cool. And then he just fucks off. He doesn't take the sword. He doesn't take the shield. He just stays invisible and leaves. And the poet's like, wait, where are you going? And Perseus is like, I'm going to the city. And he's like, wait, what? No, so the sword. And then Perseus is just gone. And the thing is, like, as he's approaching the city, he just takes the helmet off anyway. I think he just wanted to wear it for some reason. But he gets to the city and finds that there's been a burning. Someone has been burned at the stake. He goes up to a guard and says, what's all this? And he's like, what, you new around here? He's like, well, I'm new to these sites. He's like, well, that over there was a suitor to the princess. And he's like, you burned suitors at the stake? Or you burned royal suitors to the stake? He's like, not royal. But basically, there's been a curse placed on this town by Thetis' son. And so we must, like, anyone who wants to court the princess must answer a riddle. And he's like, a riddle? That sounds short. And he's like, well, it's a different riddle every day, and those who hear the riddle never get to say what they heard because, well, we burned them at the stake, as we are instructed to do. And he's like, okay, thanks, I guess. Where's the princess? And he's like, oh, she's up in that tower. She tries to distance herself from the proceedings. She doesn't like it, but yeah. It's what she must do. And he's like, okay, cool. So then he goes down, looks at the burnt corpse, and then looks up at the tower and has an idea. That night, he sneaks upon her room using his invisibility helmet, and just kind of creeps on her. He literally just, like, walks up to her bed and is like, damn, you're my destiny, Andromeda. And then at that point, a giant fucking vulture brings a cage, drops it on her balcony, and he keeps squawking at her until her soul is rent from her body and goes to the cage. At which point the vulture then picks up the cage and takes it away. Then Perseus consults and says, like, oh, I must save Andromeda and whatnot. And the poet's like, so you should probably follow that vulture to see where it takes her. He's like, but how am I supposed to follow something that flies? And he's like, well, I mean, it's a long shot, but there is that horse that of Zeus's that's still around. So if you can catch him, you should be able to. And Perseus is like, sweet, let's do that. So they go, wait, invisibly, at least one of them invisibly, and then just takes a lassos the Pegasus. Then, well, he gets the Pegasus. It's a long scene of him trying to, like, rope it. Then he rides it for a bit, lands, gives it water, and then they have the Pegasus. Then they wait for a night in which the vulture returns. It does. She goes into the cage, the vulture takes her, and then the Pegasus follows. Then we find Thetis' son's lair, which is in a swamp. And we find out that this is where she gets her riddles. She is brought there every so often or every night. We're not given a good sense of time or scale. But she's brought there, He talks to her, gives her a riddle for which they must be given. Then she leaves, and the next day gives the riddle. Or at least the next time she is courted by a suitor, she gives the riddle. So she leaves, and Perseus was also there, starts leaving, but he had the helmet on, but you see his footprints. Thetis' son, I think his name's Kybor or something like that. It's hard to remember his name. But he notices. He then tracks Perseus out. While Perseus is looking for Pegasus, he gets jumped by, let's call him Kybor, why not? He gets jumped, they struggle for a bit, and then Perseus cuts off his hand. Well, he swipes and you think he might have killed him, but when he arrives next day to court the princess, he shows that, I spared his life on the condition that he lifts the curse on the town. And I took his hand. So that's how I know that the answer to the riddle is his ring. Boom. And he chucks the hand. Then all preparations for the wedding go forward. They're about to wed. Well, while they're doing a party, Kybor, I think his name is, comes in and prays to his mother and begs her, "Please, mother, please let me get justice for them taking my hand." And she's like, "Yes, so he's protected by Zeus. I can't do shit." And he's like, "Please, oh please, at least if not him, the people he loves, Andromeda and her mother Calliope." And he's like, "Please give me justice." And she's like, "Justice or just revenge?" And then that scene ends. Then we cut to the wedding, being held in Thetis' temple, and they're going through the wedding ceremony. Everything's going nice, and they're just about to hit the last bit when Calliope either compares her or her daughter's beauty to being greater than Thetis's. Now, that's usually a slight that Aphrodite is more likely to take offense to. Of course, most goddesses would probably take offense to, their beauty being put upon lower than a mortal. But, it's usually associated with Aphrodite. But, anywho, the statue of Thetis starts to crumble. Her head falls down and she says, "Okay, so fuck you. You take that back. Take it back now. For this and the thing with my son, you are to be punished. And because of this and the thing to do with my son, you must give up your daughter. You have 30 days, and on the 30th day, the longest day of the year, she must be chained to a rock and sacrificed to the Kraken, or else the Kraken will destroy your town like it did the other one. You have thus been warned." So Perseus is like, "Okay, how do we figure this shit out? How do we kill the Kraken?" And the poet's like, "Well, we can't. Like, no one can really kill the Kraken. But, well, we might not know. There are these 3 witches that might. So let's go visit them." So everyone, plus Andromeda, because she decides to tag along, goes to visit the witches. Along the way, whilst getting lost, we cut to the gods, and the gods, or Zeus, turns to Athena and is like, "We must give him guidance, because the helmet got lost in the swamp when he fought the guy. So you must give him a replacement gift." And she's like, "What?" He's like, "Oh, why, your owl. Give him your owl. For me, please. It's an order." And so she's like, "Never." So she goes to Hephaestus, who she asks to craft a mechanical version of her lovely owl Bubo. So he does. He crafts a very fine Bubo, and sends it up on its way to help guide Perseus. And from then on, it shows them the way to the witches. It's the witches, that share one eye. They give him the guidance of, okay, because, he steals their eye. He's like, okay, answer my questions. How do we kill the thing? He's like, you can't. He's like, but there must be a way. And they're like, yes, you can kill him. You can kill the Kraken with Medusa's head. So you have to go find and kill Medusa. She's here. She has poisonous blood. Her eyes, no matter if she's alive or dead, will turn people to stone. And he's like, okay, but what so the blood. It's super poisonous, right? And they're like, super poisonous. How do we fix that? And they're like, the eye will shield your cloak, I guess. And he's like, you tell the truth? They're like, sure. He's like, okay. Tosses them the eye. And how it shields his cloak or anything, fuck if I know. He didn't do anything, and he, at the time, didn't have a red cloak. But she was like, it'll shield your red cloak. It's like, okay. So then they leave, and to get to Medusa, they have to go to the Isle of the Dead. I don't know why they have to, but they do, I guess. They go to the River Styx, but the River Styx in this movie looks like the fucking lake Styx, and also is not in the underworld, I guess. But they get the ferryman. 3 chumps join Perseus to go fight Medusa. There's an extended scene where 2 of them are, like, one just fucking vanishes. I think he's the one that gets initially tackled by the 2-headed dog, and I guess he's killed. It's not really shown all that well. But while 2 of the guys are fighting this 2-headed wolf thing, Perseus had dropped his sword and is just standing there as a snake is, like, slowly curling its way around his sword, and it keeps cutting between the soldiers fighting the dog and him just, like, trying to figure out how to get his sword from this snake. It's actually kind of a very funny scene. Eventually he just grabs the sword and, like, skirts his way around the snake. Then he goes and helps the 2 guys with the wolf. Kills it. They journey into the temple and fight Medusa. One gets shot in the back and falls into a pit of acid. And then one gets knocked out of his hiding spot and turned to stone. Perseus uses the reflection in his shield to lure Medusa and to be able to look at her. He decapitates her and moves on. I did forget to mention that between the witches and Medusa, he just straight up ditches the poet and Andromeda, which makes sense because she's supposed to be, like, the sacrifice. Why she was joining them to begin with, no clue. Hell, why she went back, I mean, I guess technically the general threat of the town being destroyed is reason enough, but still. Let's see. Then, where were we? Yeah, so then he starts on his way back. He meets back up with the remainder of his people. But there's Kybor. He goes and he pokes the Medusa head, and the blood drizzles onto the ground and starts growing scorpions, like big fuck-off scorpions. And he chucks Bubo into the lake. They fight off the scorpions, though all of his men are killed, including his friend that he talked to at the gate. Everyone's killed. It's just him. The Medusa head. He kills Kybor and sends Bubo off to retrieve Pegasus, who was kidnapped by Kybor a bit earlier. Bubo burns down Kybor's hideout. I guess kills the vulture and frees Pegasus and then leaves. And then Perseus stumbles into the arena, falls down. Then we cut to the gods, who say, Thetis says, oh, it's the longest day. So he's like, whatever, release the Kraken, I guess. And while he's doing that, as like the other gods turn away, he like reaches back and just like lifts Perseus up, I guess reviving him. And then we watch as Andromeda's prepped, taken out to be sacrificed, and then the Kraken starts rising, all while Perseus is in a mad dash to get back to some... I don't fully get it, to be honest, just how far away he is from the sacrifice, because from what I could tell, the theater that he is in is supposed to be like in, or at least very close to, the town that the princess resides over, but instead I guess it's super far away because he's booking it along, I guess. He gets there, gets knocked out of the sky, swims. Bubo brings him the head. He takes out the head, freezes the Kraken. The Kraken falls apart and dies. They get married happily ever after. And and as a little punctuation to the movie, Zeus is like, they get to live happily ever after. No one take revenge upon him. He's a good boy. He did good. Leave him alone. And the poet says like, this would make a good play, or a good poem or play or something. And he's like, don't worry, I'll make sure that you're in it, Bubo. Basically, it's supposed to be a little wink and a nod to the fact that it's a movie. But yeah, so that's that. That is Clash of the Titans, the original 80s Clash of the Titans. It is, to me, it will always have a special place in my heart. The special effects are done by Ray Harryhausen, so they're all stop motion, like kind of claymation-y things. I just love them. They're great. And I would highly recommend you seek out Ray Harryhausen stuff. They're lovely. It's a fun movie. The plot can be a little bit disjointed at times because it'll jump around a bit. Like he'll like look off into the distance, and then all of a sudden it's nighttime and he's sneaking into the princess's room. And then you have that weird sequence where she's getting picked up by a vulture, and then he takes off the helmet, and then you cut away and he's now talking to the poet, and then he's off this way and that way. There's no real journey a lot of the time. But it reminds me a lot of Krull, in a way, where you're just kind of getting pulled along the story, because it's like, we have to get to places. And the movie is kind of split into two parts. There's the initial saving of Princess Andromeda, and then the secondary saving of Princess Andromeda. Because the first half of the film, literally like the first hour, is just the introduction plus him fighting off, freeing her from Kybor. Then the rest of the film is him trying to save her from the fact that she's now been deemed to be sacrificed. And I think, overall it's pretty good. He's a bit arrogant and a bit, I guess, himbo-y. He doesn't have a whole lot going on up here. He literally loses every gift he's given, save for Bubo, and that's just because Bubo is the one thinking in the group. Like, he loses the helmet in the swamp because he just doesn't think to look for it after he takes the guy's hand. He loses the shield to Medusa's blood. It, like, melts in Medusa's blood. Then he loses the sword when he's fighting Kybor. I think when he just stabs him, he just loses the sword. Then yeah, he's given Bubo. He almost loses Bubo, but Bubo's fine because Bubo is the hero of the story. Yeah, he's not the brightest bulb in the shed. As for like the mythology inaccuracies, you can kind of glance over them and ignore them for the most part. They can be a little bit glaring at times, but it's a dumb fun movie that you just turn your brains off for. And they weren't exactly going for accuracy in the 80s for like Greek mythology. And technically, it's a hell of a lot more accurate than the 2010 Clash of the Titans, where I think they pretty much take the entire Andromeda plot, which is like the main plot of this film, and makes it like a side thing. And I think they just completely fuck off Kybor. They're like, who? Gone. And they turn it into like a pretense for a war with the gods. And then it sets up the sequel, Wrath of the Titans, which I think is supposed to be like a full-on Titan war. I think. I can't remember. I will talk about those films some point. I don't know if it'll be anytime soon, but I do want to come back to them at some point. But do I recommend the classic 80s Clash of the Titans? Absolutely. I know that a lot of younger people would probably look at the special effects and kind of go, what? And the general kind of slow-ish pace of the plot and go, ugh. But give it a chance. The special effects, especially when you learn about the effort that goes into them, are phenomenal and great and fun, and I love them. They're cheesy, dumb fun, and I just can't get enough. I do like the fact that Kybor is both played by a guy in a suit, but also has a full stop motion model whenever you're doing like a full body shot of it. It's like the Jurassic Park method. You know, all of the close-up shots are these like super detailed things, but if it's anything full body, that shit's gonna be CGI. Or in the original version of Jurassic Park, stop motion. But yeah, I do recommend it. Give it a chance. It's a good old classic. If you want a good example of stop motion special effects, give it a go. Another one that is like classic is supposed to be like Jason and the Argonauts. I really want to watch Jason and the Argonauts sometime. See, I still have plenty of good old classic Greek mythology movies to watch at some point, and I am pumped to do that eventually. Anywho, though, I guess we should leave it there. Next week will be Avatar: The Last Airbender Book 2, but before we get into that, it's update time, baby! It's a relatively short update this week, because I'm still reading Outbound Flight. Yeah, so while doing the job for my adventure, as I like to call it, I had no time. I would get back to the cabin, and I would either pass out immediately, or I would exchange some pleasantries with the person I was working with, and then I would pass the fuck out, or try my best to. I was just never in the mood to read or watch anything because I was so tired. And even when I had some extra time, I tried my best to push as hard as I could to read the book, but it's kind of hard when you feel like your brain's melting. Anywho, that's done though. The adventure's over. I don't have to whisper in a closet to record episodes or parts of episodes anymore. Yay. At least until the next adventure, whenever that may be. I've earned some money. Yay. Check. I did a thing. But anywho, with that done, I now have time to properly crank stuff out. But, as you might guess, I am now a full, book behind. Because this past week I was supposed to read Sun and the Stars. And the week before that was supposed to be Outbound Flight. I'm still on Outbound Flight. So the plan for this week is I am going to do something that's terrible for me, but I'm going to try and read all 3 books this week. I might leak into next week, but as long as I can get both Outbound Flight, Sun and the Star finished, and then Throne of Fire started, I'm happy. Because then I've at least caught up, and then I'm only eating a little bit into next week to finish the Throne of Fire. With that, I'll be okay. I'll be happy. Otherwise, yeah, it's going to be rough. Otherwise, it's going to be a bit more of a stretched out catch up, but I will catch up. It'll probably burn me out again like it did last time, but I have to try my best to get caught up. Fingers crossed. As for how I am feeling about Outbound Flight, my opinion has improved as the plots are starting to finally kind of mesh together. I'm over halfway through the book, and the plots are just now kind of meshing together. Lightly. The plot of the guy who's like he's like a triple agent technically, because he's working for Palpatine and he's working for Sidious, who are the same person. But he doesn't know that Palpatine and Sidious are the same person, so he feels like he's betraying the one person, but he's not technically, because he's actually working for that person. But anywho, that aside, the best part of the book is the Thrawn stuff. I'm not a big fan of how Timothy Zahn writes Jedi, really. The way he talks about the Force is kind of weird. It's similar to like how a lot of people describe the Force, but not quite the same. Because, I don't know, when most people talk about the Force, it's just like they're kind of normal people, but they're able to do extraordinary things through the Force. In this case, Timothy Zahn talks about the Jedi as if through their training, they've become pretty much superhuman or super beings that also use the Force. So, like, through training, they're able to jump super high and run super fast and whatnot, but they're able to make it even more extraordinary through the Force. Like, Obi-Wan's like, oh, jumping up this wall would be kind of hard, but if I, like, augment my jumps with the Force, I can get up. And it's just him describing doing a wall jump, like jumping from wall to wall to get up a thing normal-ass people can do without the Force. I don't know. It's weird. But yeah, like, the Obi-Wan stuff is okay. The Padawan stuff is alright. She becomes a full-blown Jedi, but doesn't feel like she deserves it, and still gets pulled along. The Jedi that she apprenticed for, or was the Padawan of, she he should not be a Jedi. He is pretty much trying to he tried to force this thing, Outbound Flight, to be a thing, and he got it. And now he's trying to exert control over the ship because he feels that Jedi should be in control because they got the power. So why shouldn't they be in control? They can use it for good. And then Obi-Wan's just like, but dude, that's a slippery slope. And he's like, I don't think it is. I think it's fine. And I'm going to exert my power anyway. And it's like, how has this guy not been, like, flagged as, like, potential Sith material since day one? Because the dude has had a arrogance and superiority complex constantly. Like, throughout the entire book. Like, his whole thing is, like one of his key traits is he'll like walk through a crowd, and he says that he times it to where he knows he won't hit anyone, but at the same time he fully expects for people to get the fuck out of his way. Like, and he does not care that if, for example, he were to run into them. He does not care. But yeah. Otherwise, that's kind of the story. I mean, and of course I still have half the book-ish to read, like less than half the book, but still around there. But so far it's pretty good. It's not terrible. It's just I need to properly sit down and read it. In fact, right now I'm in the middle of like a space battle, and it's actually really interesting. But I need to properly sit down and read it in order to properly do it. My goal is to finish Outbound Flight by Monday, finish Sun and the Stars by Wednesday, and then try and finish Throne of Fire by Sunday. So a week from when I'm recording this is the hope. But we'll see. Otherwise, that's that. So thank you guys so much for listening. If you guys enjoy this, please feel free to give it a like, comment, and subscribe on the YouTube end of things. Or feel free to rate, comment, share it with your friends and whatnot on the other side of things, on whatever podcast catcher you choose. But yeah, with that said, thank you guys so much for listening. I will talk to you guys later. Goodbye.